Hello, I'm Will and this is Mike with the Tabletop Donkeys.
Hello.
And in this video we'll be looking at issue 10 of Warhammer 40,000 Combat Patrol magazine, which comes with a Space Marine Librarian in Terminator Armour, and an STC medium base brush for our painting. So we'll be building and painting the Librarian in this issue, and then deploying him on the battlefield, where we'll also be learning about some special rules for weapons. So having a look through the magazine, we first up have the build guide for the Librarian. He is another push-fit model, so you can put him together without glue. And there he is finished there, as it says. Do be careful not to push too hard on certain things to avoid breaking them when pushing it together. And then the painting guide, so like our other Space Marines, we're going to be doing an all-over undercoat of Macragge blue, do a couple of coats to make sure you get an even colour, and then using some Abaddon black for the undersuit and the weapon casing, and then Retributor armour for the trim on the axe and the details on his armour. And then finally, for now, add some Wraithbone for his face and the skull in his little chest reliquary and the skull on his base, and that's as far as we're going to go with him for now, but as it says, as we'll get some more paints, we'll be adding more colours and detail. Then we learn about the Ecclesiarchy. This is the official religion of the Empyrean, which is dedicated to the worship of the God Emperor. As well as the official religion, it's the only permitted religion, and all Imperial citizens have to observe the commands of the Imperial Creed, and the Ecclesiarchy is in charge of enforcing this. Sometimes it's said that the divine power of the Emperor can in fact manifest through the actions of his servants, sometimes even in battle. And there's a bit about shrines, where there are many great shrines to the Emperor across the Imperium, or to certain saints, which are guarded and maintained by the servants of the Ecclesiarchy. And there's a vast network of preachers and missionaries spread across the Imperium, sometimes fight with its armies, or go on missionary journeys to spread the Imperial faith, and they also deal with stamping out local religions and heretical cults and so forth across the Imperium. Then we learn a bit more about the Space Marines' method of war. They're well known as a tactically flexible and adaptable force, and one of their best known doctrines is their Devastator doctrine, which emphasises heavy firepower to suppress and destroy the enemy, and the Space Marines have plenty of weapons and equipment to enact that. Such as these ones. There's a Ballistas Dreadnought. A Dreadnought is a walking machine with a mortally wounded Space Marine entombed in it, basically kept alive in life support, but still directing the machine and fighting for the Emperor. And the Ballistas Pattern Dreadnought is equipped with various heavy weapons for long-range fire support. There's a Storm Talon Gunship, which is a nimble air support unit with several weapons deployed against various foes. And the Repulsor Executioner is a kind of battle tank stroke infantry transport vehicle with a very big main gun and quite a lot of secondary weapons as well to deploy firepower at all combat ranges. And finally we have the collection article for the Librarian in Terminator Armour. Librarians are psychers, so they employ their psychic might on the battlefield to bolster their brothers and destroy the foes of the Emperor by channeling the power of the warp. There's a background table you can roll on to see what the past of your Librarian might be, and you can record his name and when you built, paint and played with him. And then over the page is his data sheet, which we'll be having a more in-depth look at in a moment. So I'll hand you over to Mike, who will show us that and some new rules, and then take us into our game.
So I'm actually going to start with a look at the Librarian and Terminator Armour's data sheet, and you can see with his range weapons he has two different profiles for his Smite range weapon. So there's a standard Witchfire or a focused Witchfire, and you can see there's a number of keywords after it. Those will all be explained in a little bit because that's the subject of today's issue. So but you can see that the focused Witchfire compared to the regular Witchfire has a higher strength and an extra point of AP, so strength 6, AP minus 2 instead of strength 5, AP minus 1. But you have to decide which one you want to use when he comes to shoot that weapon. And bear that in mind because today's issue is all about the weapon abilities. So we've seen some of these before, like Torrent, but these effectively are all the keywords that come after a weapon's name. So first up we have Pistol. A lot of models carry a pistol as a sidearm, and pistols can be fired even while the firer is within engagement range of enemy units, but if that is the case then they can only target the units that are in engagement range, so basically you can fire them in the shooting phase at units you're in close combat with. However, a unit cannot fire pistols and any other weapons it has without the pistol keyword in the same turn. You have to choose which ones you have to use. We also have rapid fire, so when a weapon with rapid fire is within half range, you add the number after the rapid fire keyword to the number of attacks they get. The example here is the Captain in Terminator Armour's Storm Bolter is rapid fire 2, so it adds 2 extra attacks when it's within half range. It's range 24, so when you're within 12 inches of the target you get 2 extra attacks with the Storm Bolter. Next up we have Blast. These are weapons that are good against massed infantry. For every 5 models in the target unit, you add 1 to the attack's characteristic of the weapon. So the example here is the Barb Gaunt's Barb Launcher. If they fire at the unit of 5 Infernus Marines, each Barb Launcher gets an extra attack. So if you roll for the entire unit at the time, you'll have 5d6 plus 5 attacks rather than the regular 5d6. Torrent we've seen before. These weapons automatically hit their target, so you don't need to roll to hit. Heavy weapons are usually very powerful but need to be stabilised, so if a unit with a heavy weapon remains stationary in the movement phase, in the subsequent shooting phase they can add one to their hit rolls. So the barb launchers from the barb gaunts are heavy, so they'll be hitting on 3s instead of 4s if they don't move. Then we have Devastating Wounds, which uses the critical hit and critical wounds rolls. A hit roll of 6 is called a critical hit, and a wound roll of 6 is called a critical wound. These are always successful regardless of any modifiers, and some keywords use them, like Devastating Wounds. So when you score a critical wound with a weapon with Devastating Wounds, then no saves may be made against that attack, including invulnerable saves, which we'll learn about in a future issue. Next up is Psychic. These weapons are generally used by Psychers, so the Librarian is a Psyker. Having the Psychic keyword doesn't make the weapon do anything differently on its own, but sometimes units or other weapons might have abilities to interact with the Psychic or Psyker keywords, so we'll learn about those in the future. 2 more to go. First up is Assault. So assault weapons are usually designed to be fired on the move, so a weapon with the assault keyword can be fired even if the unit advanced in the same turn. So the example here is the Termagant's Flesh Borers. And finally we have Hazardous. Some weapons are very powerful but have a chance to damage the user, such as if the Librarian uses the Focused Witchfire version of Smite. After you resolve all your attacks with a weapon with Hazardous rule, you roll a d6, and for each roll of 1, one model in the unit is destroyed, but instead if that model is a character it suffers 3 mortal wounds instead. And mortal wounds are the same as normal wounds, except mortal wounds you're not allowed to make any type of save against, so they're sort of very deadly weapons will do mortal wounds instead. And now we can go on to today's game, Scenario 6, Mind Over Matter. So a Librarian in Terminator has arrived, but a freak warp storm has disrupted communications on this far-flung outpost. So the Librarian has arrived, is going to try and channel the Ix's warp energy to his advantage to try and wipe out some Tyranids. So the objective for either side is to just wipe out the other. For the Space Marines we just have the Librarian in Terminator Armour, who will be in the bottom left corner, the Winged Tyranid Prime in the upper right corner, the Termagants in the bottom right corner, and then the Von Ryan's Leapers one rectangle away from the Librarian diagonally. And the Space Marines will get to go first, so it gives some tips on what to do. So for the Librarian you want to think carefully about where you want to move, but you want to try and get in range with both of his guns and still be able to charge. He can use his Stormbolter, but for the purposes of this game you have to use the Focused Witchfire profile for Smite, which is the most powerful, but it is also hazardous, and don't forget to do that at the end of the phase. And you probably want to deal with the Von Ryan's Leapers first, but you do have to resolve attacks them one at a time because they do d3 damage, so you might kill one, and damage doesn't carry over if you kill a wounded one. And then you go to the charge phase and the fight phase as normal. And if you're playing solo, when choosing which Tyranid units to fight, you pick them in the following order: the Tyranid Prime first, then the Leapers, then the Termagants, obviously skipping any that are dead or aren't eligible to fight. So you can see in the example here, the Librarian has moved up and shot and charged and fought the Von Ryan's Leapers and wiped them all out, and is in a decent position to go after one of the other Tyranid units. And it gives you a suggested priority order, so the Winged Tyranid Prime is the most dangerous, followed by the Leapers, and then the Termagants. And then the Tyranid term proceeds in much the same way, and again if you're playing solo it suggests having all the Tyranids move as close as possible to the Librarian and charge them if they're able to do so, and they will not fall back. However, if someone is actually playing the Tyranids, then it's better for them to use the Termagants to shield their more valuable units such as the Tyranid Prime. Don't forget that the Termagants can advance and still shoot, and if you're playing solo in the charge phase, every Tyranid unit within 12 will try to charge, and then obviously the fight phase proceeds in the same way. So you can see an example of that turn there, and again it does suggest that the best way to play is by playing with a human opponent, but obviously you can play this game solo as well. And here you can see the victory outcome, so you can pause and read and see which side you want to root for, and we'll get into our game. So here we are in the far-flung outpost, with the Librarian up there in the top right, the Winged Tyranid Prime in the bottom left, the Termagants in the top left, and the Von Ryan's Leapers roughly in the middle of the board. The Librarian will get to go first, obviously enough to deal with some of these Tyranids.
So the Librarian in Terminator Armour, like the Captain, only moves 5 inches, but he's going to march straight towards the Von Ryan's Leapers, because we need to deal with those first, I think, probably the biggest threat here. And then we move on to the shooting phase, where he can use both of his shooting weapons. So I'll start with his Smite power, and I have to pick the Focused Witchfire version of it, so we will be rolling d6 random attacks for this. 3. It's not a torrent weapon though, so it doesn't hit automatically like the Fire Blasters, so I do have to hit on 3s with this. I only hit once with 2 2s, and it's strength 6, and the Leapers are toughness 5, so I need a 3 to wound. That is a wound, and the focused version has an AP of -2.
So I need a 6 to save. No.
But it does D3 damage, so I can't remember if any D3s have come up in the magazine before, but basically you roll a D6 and halve it, rounding up. So, the 2 halved rounded up is 1.
So a Leaper takes 1 damage.
But then I have to roll for the hazardous rule, so I roll a dice on a 1, he takes damage. Oh dear, he takes 3 mortal wounds, which he can't save, and he's down 2 wounds left. So not off to a great start, but we can shoot with the Storm Bolter, and because it is within half range, which will be 12 inches, because it's 24 normally, it gets 4 attacks, because it's rapid fire 2, which also hit on 3s. They hit twice, with only strength 4, so it'll be winning on 5s. Nothing. But we will declare a charge in the charge phase. I basically need to not roll a double 1 to make it in. Yeah, a 9 is plenty. So the Librarian makes it in, he's going to charge to there, and then we're on to the fight phase, where the Librarian can attack. So he has 4 attacks with his Force weapon that hit on 3s, and this has only one special rule, which is Psychic, which, as we said, doesn't do anything by itself. But he only managed to hit once with that 6, and it's strength 6, so wounding on 3. Oh, it did wound at least. And minus 1 AP on this.
So 5 to save. Ooh, they made it. So now the Leapers pile in, this one moving around so the one at the back, the wounded one can get in. So with all 3 Leapers still alive, I have 18 attacks, hitting on 3s. So we got 11 hits, wounding on 4s because it's strength 5 against toughness 5. 5 failures, so that's 6 wounds with an AP of minus 1.
The Librarian has a 2+ save base, so this will be reduced to looking for 3s. Oh, and he failed 2 and he's dead because he's only got 2 wounds left. So the Librarian is dead because he only had 2 wounds left. And unfortunately the warp got better of him there.
Yeah, I think we'll have to do that again. Hopefully he won't do more damage to himself than the enemy. So we've reset the board, so the Librarian gets to go again.
So we'll start the same way. We'll move up 5 inches again and shoot to the Leapers. Another d6 attacks from the Focus Witchfire, 4 this time. Hitting on 3s, 2, and wounding on 3s, although they are devastating wounds, which I didn't mention specifically last time. So if it rolls a 6, they don't get a save. No, just 2 3s normally, so they will get a 6+ save.
Yeah, 6s to save. No, failed both.
D3 damage each, but because Leapers have 3 wounds, I will need to roll them separately. So the first one does only 1 damage, and then the second one, well, it might kill the first one. It doesn't, that's 1 again, so it doesn't even kill a whole Leaper. And then we've got the Storm Bolter again, that hits 3 times, and 5s to wound, 1 wound, but no AP.
So a 4+ to save. No, he killed a Leaper.
But I do need to roll for hazardous again, so we don't want to see a 1. That's better, a 3, so he doesn't hurt himself this time. And then we'll declare a charge. That is enough to get it. So, charging again, but there's only 2 Leapers left this time, so we'll see if we can do any better. 4 attacks with the Force Weapon again on 3s. Well, we hit twice this time. Wounding on 3s. Oh, never mind.
So with the Leapers piling in, I've only got 2, so that's 12 attacks, looking for 3s. Pretty average there with 8 hits. Wounding on 4s. Oh, that's not good, only 2 wounds.
So I need 3s to save. Failed 1, so the Librarian is down to 4, but we're in a much better position than we were last time.
So we've made it to the Tyranid turn. The Vulnerized Leapers are going to stay in combat. The Tyranid Prime has moved up 12, and I did advance with the Termagants, so they moved 10 inches just to get them away from the Librarian. I'm not going to try and charge them in because they're really not going to be able to hurt him in melee, and I want to set them up to be able to shoot at him. So there'll be no shooting because I can't shoot into melee, and we'll be on to the charge phase where the Tyranid Prime will try and charge the Librarian. So Tyranid Prime will need about a 5 to be able to reach the Librarian, and he gets an 11, that's definitely enough. So with a mighty charge, the Tyranid Prime will go in behind the Librarian, and it will get to fight first because it charged. 6 attacks hitting on 2s, and we got 1 miss, so that's 5 hits. Strength 6 versus toughness 5, so wounding on 3s, only 2 wounds, minus 1 AP.
3s to save, made them both, so Terminator Armour protects. But then we're on to units that haven't charged.
And because it's the Tyranid turn, the Librarian gets to go first.
And he's going to attack the Leapers again because they haven't fought yet, so if I can kill them before they do any damage. So 4 attacks on 3s, hits twice again, 3s to wound, 2 again.
AP minus 1, so 5s. We saved 1.
D3 damage, 1 again.
So it's 1 damage on the Leaper, and then the 2 remaining Leapers will get to go. 12 attacks hitting on 3s, 7 hits. 4s to wound, 2 wounds again. Terminator Armour is definitely tough.
3s to save, failed 1 again, so another wound sneaks through.
With the Librarian down to 3 wounds, we'll be through to the Space Marine turn.
Where none of the Librarian's weapons are pistols, so he can't shoot in combat. Obviously he's not going to fall back, because that would just mean he'll get shot and charged again. So we go straight to the fight phase, because there's obviously no charging, where it's my turn, so the Tyranids get to pick it first.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick the Tyranid Prime to attack. 6 attacks. 2s to hit. Ooh, 2 misses. Wounding on 3s. Only 1 wound.
with a 3 to save, which I made, so the Librarian at least is not dying. And he'll attack the Leapers again, for the same reason as before. Oh, he hit 4 times this time.
Got his iron now.
3s to wound, not so good. 2 again.
5+ saves, fail both.
So D3 damage 1 at a time, there's one with 2 wounds left. Hey, 3, so it dies, but the extra wound doesn't carry over, so we've got 1 left on full wounds, which takes 2.
The wounded Leaper will die, and the extra one takes 2 wounds. There's a down to 1 wound remaining. 6 attacks from the surviving Leaper, looking for 3s. 4 hits, 4s to wound. Oh, 4 wounds.
Saving on 3s. Oh, we take 2 more wounds, the Librarian's down to 1 left.
So in the Tyranid turn, I'm not going to move the Termagants, and once again, the Librarian will get to fight first in the fight phase, because I'm not going to fall back.
And he's going to attack the Tyranid Prime this time, because hopefully the Leaper won't kill him. So 4 attacks on 3s, getting 3 hits. Wounding on 3s, because the Tyranid Prime is also toughness 5, so 2 wounds, last one.
So 5+ saves. Oh, made both. Both my units will get to fight. I'll do the Tyranid Prime first, see if he can actually do some damage. All attacks hit. 3s to wound. That is 6 wounds at -1.
Has to make all of the saves. No, failed. So the Librarian takes 4 damage from that and goes down again. That's the end of the Librarian for a second time.
A bit more successful than last time. And I think we'll actually leave it there. Perhaps the odds are a bit too stacked against the Librarian, but we'll have a talk about it and recap this game for you now. So that was the game for issue 10 of Warhammer 40,000 Combat Patrol magazine. How do you think that went?
Well, let's not talk about the first attempt, but even the second attempt, I think, not so well for the Librarian. I think he's a little bit outmatched. We have to consider that I didn't roll very well at all for basically anything, actually. My D3 damages were quite poor. I could have actually killed all the Leapers with some slightly better rolls. But even then, I think the Tyranid Prime will probably beat the Librarian in melee eventually, or at the very least do enough damage that if the Librarian does survive, the Termagants can just shoot him a lot.
Yeah, I think if the Librarian's going to win this game, you'll heavily rely on killing off all the Leapers in his first turn.
Yeah, with a really good round of Smite and then a good charge, might be able to finish them off without taking any damage.
Yeah, I don't think the Termagants are going to be much of a threat to him at all. They might chip a wound off here and there. Although the Tyranid Prime didn't have a very good showing, I think that the Leapers did more damage to the Librarian in the second game. I think we've seen the Tyranid Prime can beat the Captain occasionally, and the Librarian is worse than the Captain in melee. He hasn't got as much AP and he has fewer attacks and he's not as accurate.
He has more range damage output than the Captain thanks to his Smite, but obviously he can't use that if he's stuck in melee, so unless he kills the Leaper straight away, he's going to struggle to deploy that effectively, because the Tyranids are much faster than he is as well. So
yeah, to make this more balanced, you'd probably have to bring in the Infernus Marines as well.
Yeah, overall I think he took on a little bit more than he could chew.
Yeah, although I think this game is probably more about learning as many of the new weapon special rules as possible, because of all the ones we've learned, the Librarian actually gets to use most of them. So
yeah, we didn't see Devastating Wounds come up, because I never rolled a 6 to wound with the Smite. We didn't get to see Assault being used, because you didn't need to shoot with the Termagants, but it was in this game technically. And obviously we already know what Torrent does. When we see the Bargaunts next, we'll be able to see Heavy and Blast in action, hopefully.
Although we did learn quite a few weapon special rules, that is quite a good chunk of them. There are a few more we haven't seen yet, but this is a good starting point. It's possibly quite a lot to wrap your head around, but once you get used to using them, it's not hard to remember, and it might actually be worth making up a little cheat sheet to have them all on hand. And, well, I like the Librarian model, cool pose, and I do like you can see I've painted all the sort of inlays of his armour, which if you can make look like he's channeling warp energy, it looks pretty good. Yeah. Unfortunately, he doesn't have like a closed helmet version, I don't think, so you're stuck with having to paint his face, which is a slight annoyance. There's one extra bit to paint. You can't just paint blue with the rest of his armour.
Yes, and he's painted blue because Librarians in chapters that follow the Codex Astartes have Librarians wear blue. That question usually comes up when we have a new Librarian, because I don't think it's mentioned in the magazine yet. But yeah, I mean, with the sort of glowing runes and stuff, you can kind of go to town on the psychic effects if you want to.
His Force Axe as well is a really cool look. Quite often with the latest Marines, they really seem to go heavily on swords when you don't really see axes all that much, so it's nice to have a bit of variety in your Terminator models.
I also like how he's got a wrist-mounted Stormbolter so that his hand is free for doing psychic gestures. And
yeah, the sort of Grey Knight style Stormbolter.
Exactly how well he fits into the overall combat patrol is up for debate, but we'll talk about that when we get the rest of it.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about it more in the future, but he's probably intended to go with the Terminator squad. But otherwise, we don't have much more to say, so as always, if you like this content, do leave a like and subscribe, and give us any comments how you've been getting on with the collection. We've been the Tabletop Donkeys, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye for now.